Pick up your illegal cart before I have it crushed." Mayor Victor Hale said it into the microphone with a smile, as if the whole town hall hearing had gathered for a joke. The cameras loved him for it. 3 local news crews stood along the back wall of the city council chamber in Savannah, Georgia. Phones were lifted from every row. A few people in suits chuckled because the mayor had taught them over the years that laughing first was safer than thinking twice. At the center aisle, beside a dented stainless steel food cart, stood Mateo Alvarez. He was 46, narrow-shouldered from years of leaning into steam and summer heat, wearing the same clean white apron he wore every morning on Bay Street. His hands stayed folded over a small tin cash box pressed against his stomach. The box was old, blue around the edges, with one corner patched in silver tape. His daughter Sophia stood behind him with her backpack still on one shoulder. She was 12, old enough to understand embarrassment, young enough to believe grown men should not enjoy causing it. The mayor pointed at the cart. "This is not a family business," Hale said. "This is an unlicensed operation hiding behind a sob story." A low sound moved through the room. Mateo's jaw tightened, but he did not answer. On the wall behind the council bench hung a framed city slogan. "Welcome starts here." Under it, 5 council members sat in polished chairs, pretending not to see the girl wiping her cheek with the heel of her hand. Mayor Hale leaned back, pleased with the shape of the moment. His suit was navy, his tie red, his campaign pin shining under the lights. "This city has standards," he continued. "We are not going to let every man with a cooler and a sad accent decide he owns our sidewalks." That crossed a line even some of his supporters felt. A woman in the 3rd row stopped filming and lowered her phone. A city clerk froze with her pen above the minutes. Near the aisle, Officer Denise Harper, assigned to keep order at public meetings, shifted her weight but did not speak. Mateo only held the tin box tighter. The mayor mistook that silence for defeat. "You were given notice," Hale said. "You were given a chance to leave quietly. Instead, you dragged your child here and wasted this chamber's time." Sophia moved closer to her father. "I'm not dragged," she said, barely loud enough for the front row. The mayor heard her anyway. His smile thinned. "Young lady, your father's choices are not your burden to explain." Mateo's eyes lifted then. Not angry, not pleading, just awake. For a second, the room seemed to notice that the vendor everyone had been talking over was no longer waiting to be spared. He was waiting for something else. On the table beside the council microphone sat a city envelope, already opened. Inside was the order that would revoke Mateo's vendor license, seize the cart, and bar him from applying again for 5 years. 5 years was not a fine. 5 years was rent, medicine, school uniforms, the small apartment over the laundromat, the last photograph of Mateo's wife tucked behind the cart's spice rack because he said she should still come to work with him. Mayor Hale tapped the envelope. "Sign the acknowledgement," he said. "Admit the violation. Remove the cart by Friday morning. If you refuse, the city will treat this as obstruction." Then he lowered his voice just enough to make it feel personal while still being caught by every microphone in the room. "And if you make me say it plainly, Mr. Alvarez, I will. People like you come here, take advantage of our kindness, and then act wounded when the rules finally find you." A chair scraped somewhere in the back. Mateo's daughter grabbed his sleeve. The mayor reached for the order and slid it across the table. "Sign." Mateo did not move. The old tin box gave a soft metallic click under his thumb. Most people thought it held cash. 1s, 5s, coins, maybe the emergency money a street vendor kept hidden from thieves and rain. But Mateo opened it with both hands. Inside, under a folded white towel, was a small black digital recorder. Scratched, plain, no bigger than a pack of gum. Mayor Hale's expression changed before anyone understood why. Mateo placed the recorder beside the city envelope. The clerk's pen finally touched paper. Hale gave a short laugh. "Whatever stunt this is, it will not change the law." Mateo pressed one button. A hiss filled the chamber. It was not Mateo's voice. It was the mayor's. And the words on that tape were calm, clear, and impossible to blame on a misunderstanding. The first sentence had barely played before Councilwoman Elaine Porter sat forward like she had been struck by cold water. Officer Harper's hand went to the radio at her shoulder. A reporter in the back whispered, "Keep rolling." Mayor Hale reached for the recorder. Mateo covered it with his palm. "No," he said quietly. "You already had your hearing." And for the first time all afternoon, the mayor had nothing ready. But to understand why a street vendor carried City Hall's secret in a battered tin box, and why the mayor had risked everything to destroy him, you have to go back 3 weeks earlier. Before the hearing, before the cameras, before a little girl learned how heavy silence could be. 3 weeks earlier, Mateo Alvarez unlocked his food cart before sunrise on a narrow side street off Bay Street, where the old brick buildings still held the night's damp air. Savannah was quiet at that hour. Delivery trucks sighed at the curb. A street sweeper crawled past with its yellow light turning. Somewhere near the river, gulls called over the rooftops before the tourists arrived, and the city remembered how pretty it was supposed to be. Mateo worked by feel. He wiped the steel counter, checked the propane, lined up paper trays, and set a row of glass spice jars where the morning sun would find them. Paprika, cumin, black pepper, dried oregano from a small market 2 neighborhoods over. The last thing he set out was the blue tin cash box. He placed it under the counter, beside a roll of napkins and a folded photograph of his wife, Elena. In the picture, she was laughing with one hand on the cart and flour on her cheek back when the paint was fresh and the permit sticker was new. Mateo touched the edge of the photograph once, then shut the drawer. By 6:30, the first regulars came. A parking attendant bought coffee and a breakfast empanada. A nurse from Memorial Health took 2 chicken arepas to go. A construction foreman paid in quarters and apologized, and Mateo counted them like they were bills from a bank. He knew everyone's order. He knew who wanted extra sauce, who pretended not to want extra sauce, who was trying to quit sugar, and who needed a paper bag with handles because arthritis made thin plastic hurt. People called him Matty because it was easier. He never corrected them. At 7:15, Sophia arrived in her school uniform, hair still damp from a rushed shower, backpack too heavy for her shoulders. She slipped behind the cart, kissed 2 fingers, and tapped her mother's photograph through the drawer. "Bus is late again," she said. "Then you eat." I brushed my teeth. "Then you eat quietly." She rolled her eyes but took the warm pocket of bread he handed her. Mateo watched her bite into it and pretend not to smile. Sophia was the reason he measured every dollar twice. Rent was due on the 1st. The old Toyota needed a water pump. Her asthma inhaler cost more than the city fines he used to get for parking 6 inches outside the painted line. And now there was the school trip to Washington, D.C., a thing Sophia tried to act casual about because she had heard him telling the landlord he needed 1 more week. He kept a small envelope in the tin box labeled Sophia Trip. It had $43 inside. The cart was not only a job, it was the last thing Elena had built with him before the cancer came back and took the softness from their apartment. She had been the one who understood forms, numbers, renewals, and city offices. She had kept every receipt in a plastic folder, sorted by year, because she said America loved paper more than people. After she died, Mateo learned. At night, after Sophia slept, he studied city ordinances at the kitchen table with a Spanish-English dictionary, a notebook, and old videos from the public library website. He underlined words like revocation, appeal, and administrative record. He was not a lawyer, but he had learned that a man who could not afford one had to become very careful. That morning, his permit binder sat beneath the register. Health inspection, tax certificate, vending zone approval, insurance card, license renewal. Every page was in a clear plastic sleeve. Every date was highlighted. He checked it the way some men checked a weapon. At 9, while Mateo was serving a line of office workers, a black city SUV rolled to the curb. The conversations thinned. Mayor Victor Hale got out wearing sunglasses and a pressed gray suit, though the morning was already too warm for either. Behind him came Carl Benton, the city's code enforcement supervisor, with a tablet tucked under one arm. Hale did not usually visit vendors. He visited ribbon cuttings, church breakfasts during election years, and waterfront projects with camera crews. There were no cameras this time. Mateo dried his hands on a towel. "Good morning, Mayor." Haley studied the cart as if it had been left there by accident. "Mr. Alvarez," he said, "we've received complaints." Mateo glanced at the sidewalk. The line had gone still. The nurse lowered her coffee. Sophia, who should have been walking to the bus stop, froze beside the newspaper box. "What complaints?" Mateo asked. "Obstruction, odor, unlicensed activity." Mateo reached under the counter and brought out the binder. "I have license, renewed in March." Carl Benton shifted his tablet from one hand to the other. His face had the tired blankness of a man who did what he was told and slept anyway. Hale did not touch the binder. "The city is reviewing several sidewalk permits downtown," he said. "Public safety issue. You'll need to vacate this location pending review." "For how long?" "That depends on cooperation." Mateo heard the word the way it was meant. Sophia came closer. "Dad?" He gave her a small shake of the head. "Not now." The mayor's attention moved to her, then back to the cart. "This is exactly the problem. Children standing around commercial equipment before school. Propane tanks, hot oil, liability everywhere. She is waiting for bus. She should be waiting somewhere safer." The nurse spoke from the line. "Mayor, she's here every morning." "She's fine." Hale's smile appeared, official and cold. "I appreciate community loyalty, but rules cannot bend because someone makes good breakfast." Mateo opened the binder to the permit sleeve and laid it flat on the counter. The mayor finally glanced down. For 1 second, something flickered across his face. Not confusion, recognition. Then it was gone. Carl Benton cleared his throat. "We can issue a temporary removal notice today." Mateo's hand hovered over the binder. He had been expecting trouble for months, though not this directly. Ever since the city announced its new riverfront improvement plan, small vendors had begun disappearing from corners they had worked for years. One man selling roasted peanuts packed up after 3 inspections in 1 week. A flower seller near Johnson Square said her renewal vanished in the system. Mateo had kept copies of everything. He had also kept something else. Inside the tin cash box beneath the folded towel was the little black recorder Elena had bought years ago for English classes at the community center. She used to record lectures because fast English made her tired. After her death, Mateo used it for permit meetings. "Paper gets lost," she had said. "Voices do not." Mayor Hale tapped the counter once. "You have until Friday to remove this cart from Bay Street," he said. "If you want a hearing, request one, but I would not advise making this public." Mateo heard Sophia breathe in. Friday was 4 days away. 4 days to lose the corner that paid their rent. 4 days before the envelope for her school trip became grocery money. 4 days before Elena's cart became a piece of metal in a city impound lot. Mateo closed the binder carefully. "I want the hearing," he said. The mayor's smile faded just enough for Mateo to see the warning underneath. "Then you'll get 1. Mayor Victor Hale had built his career on photographs. There he was in front of repaved streets, new street lamps, school murals, police charity breakfasts, and brick sidewalks cleaned until they shined for tourists. His campaign signs called him the mayor who listens, and if a camera was nearby, he listened with both hands folded and his chin lowered. But in City Hall, away from microphones, listening was mostly something other people did while Hale decided. His office overlooked the square, where live oaks spread their branches like old authority. On the wall behind his desk hung a framed magazine cover naming Savannah one of America's most charming small cities. Beside it was a rendering of the riverfront improvement plan. The drawing showed cafes, planters, bike racks, and families eating under striped awnings. It did not show Mateo's cart. It did not show the peanut man, the flower seller, the woman who sold pralines from a licensed table near the trolley stop, or any of the people who had made those sidewalks feel alive before consultants discovered them. Hale stood before the rendering that Tuesday afternoon with Carl Benton at his side. "This corner has to be cleaned before the investor walkthrough," Hale said. Carl kept his eyes on the tablet. "Alvarez requested the town hall hearing. Of course he did. He has current paperwork." "He has old paperwork," Hale said. "The new sidewalk safety rule gives us discretion." The rule had been passed 2 months earlier with little discussion. It was written to sound harmless. No vendor could operate within 15 feet of a crosswalk, curb ramp, loading zone, utility access point, public bench, fire hydrant, building entrance, or designated pedestrian flow area. In old downtown Savannah, that meant nearly every corner could be declared unsafe whenever the city wanted it. Carl knew it. Hale knew he knew it. "Mark it as obstruction," the mayor said. Carl's thumb paused above the screen. "He's been in that same location for 9 years, and now we are modernizing." The door opened, and Elaine Porter entered without waiting for permission. She was the councilwoman for Mateo's district, a former legal aid attorney with gray at her temples and a habit of carrying folders instead of depending on staff summaries. "Victor," she said, "why is my office getting calls about Bay Street vendors being threatened?" Hale's public smile returned automatically. "Elaine, no one is being threatened. That is not what I'm hearing. You're hearing campaign season panic. There isn't an election this month. There is always an election coming." Porter set her folder on his desk. "Mateo Alvarez has a valid permit. Health rating is clean. Tax account active." "I checked." Carl's eyes moved once toward the mayor, then back down. Hale did not touch the folder. "Validity isn't the only issue," he said. "Public safety matters. So does selective enforcement." The temperature in the office changed. Hale walked to the window. Below, 2 tourists posed under moss-draped branches, smiling at a city they would leave before seeing how it treated the people who served them. "Elaine," he said, "this city has worked too hard to become what it is. We cannot let every informal operation define our front door. He is not informal, he is licensed, for now." Porter studied him. "What does that mean?" "It means there is a process." The hearing was scheduled for Friday at 4, a time chosen carefully. Too late for most working people to attend. Early enough for the evening news to collect footage if Hale wanted it. Officially, it was a vendor permit review. In the building, everyone called it the hearing. The next morning, Carl delivered the notice by hand. Mateo read it twice under the cart's awning while customers pretended not to watch. The notice listed obstruction, unsafe storage, improper display, and suspected misrepresentation on a permit renewal. That last line made him lift his head. "Misrepresentation of what?" he asked. Carl's face tightened. "I just deliver notices. You inspect. You know this cart. I said I just deliver notices." Sophia arrived then, breathless from hurrying after school. She saw the paper in her father's hand and stopped smiling. "Is that bad?" Mateo folded it before she could read the whole thing. "It is city words. That means bad." A man in a linen jacket near the counter gave a small laugh, not kind enough to be hidden. "Maybe these carts should be in designated markets anyway. Sidewalks are crowded." Sophia's cheeks went hot. Mateo handed the man his order with steady fingers. "Have a good day." The man checked the bag as if expecting fraud inside his lunch. That was the small cruelty Mateo hated most. Not the mayor, not the notice, not even Carl's refusal to meet his eyes. It was how quickly a piece of official paper gave strangers permission to think less of him. That afternoon he went to the permits office. The lobby smelled like printer heat and floor polish. People sat in plastic chairs holding forms with numbers on them. A television in the corner played muted weather reports. Behind the glass partition, a clerk named Ruth Kim searched his account and frowned. "Your permit is active," she said. Mateo released a breath. "But there is a review flag. What flag? I can't remove it. I ask what it says. Ruth lowered her voice. Pending administrative clarification. That means nothing. I know. Their eyes met through the glass. For a moment, Mateo saw a person tired of being the human face on a machine she did not control. She slid a printed copy of his permit status beneath the window. Keep that, she said. It shows active as of today. Mateo folded the paper and placed it in the permit binder. It was not the proof he needed to stop a mayor, but it was something solid, a date, a city seal, a fact that would not blush or forget. As he turned to leave, he noticed Carl Benton at the far end of the hallway, speaking into his phone near a closed conference room. Carl's voice was low, but one phrase carried. No, he doesn't know about the January meeting. Mateo slowed. Carl saw him and ended the call. Neither man spoke. On the bus ride home, Sophia leaned against Mateo's shoulder and drew tiny squares in the fog on the window with her fingertip. What happens if they take the cart? She asked. He wanted to say they would not. Instead, he said, then we fight before they take it. With a lawyer. With truth. That sounds cheaper. He almost smiled. At home, after dinner, Mateo opened the blue tin box on the kitchen table. Sophia did homework beside him, pretending not to watch as he checked the batteries in the black recorder. He stared at it longer than he meant to. January meeting. He had not forgotten that day. He had sat in a back room at City Hall with Hale, Carl, and a folding table between them, asking why 3 renewal applications had been delayed after Elena died. He had brought the recorder because grief made his memory unreliable. He had not listened to that file in months. Some memories, even useful ones, stayed closed until pain made them necessary. Mateo placed the recorder back under the towel and shut the tin box. Across the table, Sophia whispered, Mom would say label everything. Mateo took a blank sticker from the drawer. On it, in careful black ink, he wrote one word, hearing. On Wednesday morning, Mateo found a red violation sticker pasted across the serving window of his cart. It had been pressed on crooked, half over the menu Elena had painted by hand. The adhesive pulled at the old lettering where she had written chicken stew in English and Spanish, because she said hunger should not need translation. Unsafe obstruction, pending removal. Someone had done it before sunrise, when the street was empty and there were no customers to ask questions. Mateo stood with the key still in his hand. For a minute, the city felt very quiet. Then the first delivery truck rolled past and a man on a bicycle slowed just enough to read the sticker. His face changed from sleepy to curious. By 7 o'clock, 3 people had taken pictures. The nurse came by and touched the edge of the paper. Can you open? Mateo peeled the sticker carefully, inch by inch, trying not to rip Elena's paint. I can serve until hearing, he said. Are you sure? He was not sure, but he opened anyway. By noon, Carl Benton arrived with 2 uniformed officers Mateo did not know. No mayor this time. No speech. Just Carl holding another form and avoiding the line of customers that had grown longer because people came when they sensed a story. You can't operate with a posted safety notice, Carl said. Mateo pulled out his binder. The notice says pending review, not closed. Carl's mouth tightened. The mayor's office directed immediate compliance. Show where it says immediate. One officer shifted, uncomfortable. The other watched Mateo's hands as if the binder might become a threat. Carl scanned the paper on his own clipboard, then lowered his voice. Don't do this in front of everyone. You came in front of everyone. A few customers murmured. Sophia was not there yet, thank God. Mateo could still bear shame when she did not have to carry it. Carl glanced toward the corner where a traffic camera hung above the crosswalk. You're within 15 feet of a pedestrian flow area. This whole sidewalk is pedestrian. That's the rule. No, Mateo said. That is the excuse. It was the wrong thing to say if he wanted peace. Carl wrote a citation for $500. When Mateo took the paper, his fingers stayed steady, but his chest felt hollow. $500 was the electric bill, half the rent, and the school trip envelope emptied before it had a chance to matter. The nurse spoke up from the curb. "I'll be at that hearing." Carl did not answer. After they left, Mateo found Sophia standing across the street. She had seen enough. Her backpack hung from one shoulder and her eyes were fixed on the red paper folded beside the register. "How much?" she asked. "Adult numbers." "How much, Dad?" He slid the citation under the binder. "Too much." She walked behind the cart and pulled the small envelope from the tin box before he could stop her. The one labeled Sophia Trip. "Use this." "No. I don't even want to go. That is not true. I can see monuments on the internet." Mateo took the envelope and put it back. "Your mother wanted you to see the world bigger than worry." Sophia's face pinched at the mention of Elena, but she did not cry. That was one of the things Mateo hated about hardship. It taught children to swallow tears before they had a chance to be children. That night, he stayed at the kitchen table after Sophia went to bed. The apartment above the laundromat trembled with the machines below. A blue-white light from the street fell across stacks of papers, permits, receipts, maps, notices, a printed copy of the new sidewalk safety rule, and Ruth Kim's permit status page. Mateo listened to the January recording with one earbud in. At first, there was only the scratch of chairs, the rustle of his own folder, Carl saying the coffee machine was broken. Then Mayor Hale's voice came through, impatient even in memory. "You want your renewals cleared, Mr. Alvarez, then you stop asking questions about the riverfront zone." Mateo paused the file. His pulse climbed so fast he had to put one hand flat on the table. He remembered the meeting, but not every word. Grief had turned that winter into broken glass. He had been trying to keep the cart alive while learning how to braid Sophia's hair, how to cook without Elena correcting the salt, how to fill out forms with a body that wanted to sleep all day. He pressed play again. Hale's voice continued. "There are going to be changes downtown. People who cooperate will be relocated. People who embarrass this office will discover how many regulations they have been ignoring." Then Mateo heard his own voice, smaller than he remembered. "My permit is legal." And Hale answering, "Legal is whatever survives review." Mateo removed the earbud and stared at the recorder. There it was. Not just cruelty, not just pressure. A warning from the mayor, months before the city pretended the problem was propane tanks and sidewalk space. But he knew a recording alone could be attacked, edited, misunderstood, dismissed as emotion. He needed one clean fact to stand beside it. On Thursday morning, Mateo went back to City Hall before opening the cart. Ruth Kim was at the glass window again. She saw him and gave the smallest shake of her head, as if warning him the air had ears. "I need certified permit status," Mateo said. Ruth typed without expression. "Reason? Hearing." Her fingers paused, then resumed. Behind him, a man coughed. A printer clicked. Somewhere down the hall, laughter came from an office where nobody was waiting for their life to be stamped. Ruth slid the page through the slot. It carried the city seal, the date, and the words "active." No suspension order entered. She did not meet his eyes as she whispered, "That is all I can give you. That is enough." "Mr. Alvarez," she said, a little louder now. "Keep a copy somewhere other than your cart." He understood then that she knew more than she could say. At home, he scanned the page at the laundromat office for $2 and emailed it to himself. Then he placed the certified copy in the blue tin box with the recorder. Central proof. Factual proof. A voice and a seal. Friday came hot and airless. Mateo opened early, but customers kept asking about the hearing instead of ordering. Some promised to come. Others only said it was a shame, which was the kind of sympathy that cost nothing and changed nothing. At 2:30, Carl arrived again. This time, he carried an acknowledgement form. "If you sign this," Carl said, "the mayor may reduce the fine and let you apply for a market stall next year." Mateo read the first paragraph, By signing, he would admit he had operated without proper authorization. He would waive appeal. He would accept removal of the cart by Friday morning and agree not to seek damages or challenge prior enforcement. It was not mercy. It was a confession someone else had written. Mateo handed it back. No. Carl's voice dropped. Think about your daughter. I am. You lose today, they take the cart. You sign, maybe you keep a future. They kept moving while his mind stayed fixed on the tin box. Future with a lie is not a future, he said. Carl's eyes flickered, and for half a second shame almost reached the surface. Then a city tow truck pulled up behind him. Sophia came running from the bus stop, saw the truck, and stopped in the middle of the sidewalk. Mateo lifted the tin box from under the counter. The blue paint was chipped. The silver tape on the corner had started to peel. Elena would have told him to fix it properly. Instead, he tucked it under his arm and locked the cart. Carl watched him. You're really going to make him do this in public? Mateo glanced once at his daughter, then toward City Hall. No, he said. He already chose public. By the time Mateo reached the council chamber, the hearing had become more than a hearing. The mayor's staff had arranged the room like a lesson. The cart was parked in the center aisle where everyone had to pass it to sit down. A printed sign had been taped to its front. Evidence Item A. The words made Elena's painted menu look like contraband. Local reporters stood near the back. 2 city cameras faced the council bench. A row of business owners filled the front seats, men and women who wanted the riverfront improvement plan approved and did not want a food cart slowing the mayor's promises. Sophia sat in the second row beside the nurse from Bay Street, whose name was Marlene Price. Marlene had come in scrubs, straight from a shift, her hospital badge still clipped to her pocket. Mateo wanted Sophia outside this room. She refused. I heard what they said on the sidewalk, she told him. I can hear what they say in here. He had no answer for that. Mayor Hale entered last, letting the room settle around him. He greeted 3 donors by name, touched Councilwoman Porter's shoulder as if they were friends, and took his place beneath the city slogan. Carl Benton sat at a side table with a stack of forms. He would not raise his eyes. The first 20 minutes moved like a trap with polished edges. Carl read the violations: obstruction, unsafe storage, improper display, suspected misrepresentation. He described the cart's location in careful official language, as though the sidewalk had been wounded by empanadas. Mateo was allowed to speak for 3 minutes. He presented his binder. He explained the permit renewal. He said the cart had passed inspection and that the new rule was being used only against certain vendors. Mayor Hale interrupted twice. Stay on the violation. I am. No, Mr. Alvarez, you are making allegations. Councilwoman Porter asked to see the permit binder. Hale said the hearing officer would receive relevant documents after public comment. There was no hearing officer visible, only the mayor controlling the microphone. When Marlene stood to speak, Hale thanked her for her service before cutting her off at 90 seconds. I buy lunch from Mateo 3 times a week, she said. I've never seen him block the sidewalk. That is your personal experience, Hale replied. It's the sidewalk. A few people laughed softly, and Hale's mouth tightened. Then a business owner in the front row said vendors like Mateo lowered the tone of historic downtown. Another said tourists wanted clean pathways, not smoke and shouting. A third admitted he had never eaten at Mateo's cart but supported consistent standards. Each comment landed on Sophia like a thrown pebble. Mateo watched her shoulders fold inward. He could handle losing money, he could handle citations, but seeing his child learn that adults could dress contempt in civic language made something inside him ache beyond anger. Then Hale brought out the acknowledgement form. He slid it across the table and told Mateo to sign. The room sharpened. The mayor's voice carried easily to the cameras. He called the cart illegal. He said Mateo had hidden behind a sob story. He accused him of dragging his child into a process she did not understand. Sophia whispered that she had not been dragged. Hale corrected her in front of everyone. Mateo's hand closed over the tin box. He could feel the old dented lid under his palm. He could feel the corner Elena had patched with silver tape after Sophia dropped it as a little girl and cried like she had broken the whole business. The mayor pointed toward the cart. If you refuse, the city will proceed with seizure. The license will be revoked, and you will be barred from reapplying for 5 years. A camera light blinked red. 5 years. The number did what the insults could not. It pushed past Mateo's ribs and found every fear he had kept private. The apartment, the inhaler, the trip envelope, the photograph in the drawer. The promise he made at Elena's hospital bed that Sophia would not grow up feeling like life had only taken from her. Hale leaned toward the microphone. And if you make me say it plainly, Mr. Alvarez, I will. People like you come here, take advantage of our kindness, and then act wounded when the rules finally find you. The words did not explode. They settled. That was worse. They settled on the city seal, on the council bench, on the reporter's notebook, on Sophia's face. Marlene rose halfway from her seat. Mayor, that's enough. Hale ignored her. Councilwoman Porter said, Victor, stop. He did not. The mayor lifted the form again. Sign the acknowledgement. Mateo stared at the paper. For a moment, the room narrowed to ink lines and blank space. If he signed, he could maybe keep the cart out of impound for a few days. Maybe get a market stall someday, far from Bay Street, where the city could point to him as proof it had been generous. If he refused and failed, the loss would be public and complete. Sophia's hand found the back of his chair. Dad, she whispered. Not a command, not a plea, just his name without saying it. Mateo slid the acknowledgement form back across the table. No. Hale's expression hardened. Then let the record show the respondent refuses compliance. He nodded to Officer Harper near the wall. Harper did not move right away. She was not there as Mateo's friend. She was there to keep order. But even duty has a sound when it scrapes against conscience. The mayor's voice lowered. Officer. Harper took 2 steps forward. Sophia stood, panic breaking through her careful bravery. You can't take it. It was my mom's. Hale glanced at the cameras, then softened his voice in the worst possible way. Sweetheart, your mother's memory does not exempt your father from the law. Mateo rose so fast his chair legs struck the floor. The chamber reacted before he said a word. Phones lifted higher. A reporter leaned in. Carl Benton's pen stopped moving. Mateo placed one hand on the cart, not to claim property, but to steady himself before grief turned into something the mayor could use. My wife, he said, filled every paper this city asked for. Hale gave a thin sigh. This is not about your wife. It became about her when you called her work illegal. The words hung there. For the first time, Carl raised his head. Mayor Hale's gaze moved to the blue tin box tucked under Mateo's arm. He seemed to notice it fully now. What is in the box, Mr. Alvarez? Mateo did not answer. Hale nodded at Harper. Check it. Councilwoman Porter sat forward. On what basis? Potential evidence related to unlicensed cash activity. The phrase was ugly enough to wake the room. Sophia moved between Harper and her father before anyone could stop her. No, she said. Mateo's heart clenched. Sophia, sit. Harper froze. Her hand remained at her side. The mayor seized the moment. Sophia flinched as if he had slapped her. Mateo's face changed. Not loudly, not dramatically. Something simply closed. He set the tin box on the table. The small metal click carried farther than it should have. Then he opened it. Under the folded towel lay the recorder and the certified permit status page with the city seal. Councilwoman Porter stood. Mr. Alvarez, she said, careful and clear, is that relevant to this hearing? Mateo lifted the black recorder into his hand. Yes, he said. It is the hearing before this hearing. Mayor Hale laughed before the recorder played. It was a practiced laugh, small and dismissive, the kind meant to tell everyone else how to feel. Mr. Alvarez, he said, this is a municipal hearing, not a theater. Mateo placed the recorder beside the microphone. No theater, he said. Record. Hale's eyes narrowed. You do understand that random audio files have no standing here. Councilwoman Porter answered before Mateo could. Let him identify it. The mayor's head snapped toward her. Elaine, I am conducting this hearing. No, Porter said. You are implicated in the evidence he is trying to present. Let him identify it. A murmur passed through the chamber. Mateo kept his hand near the recorder, not touching the button yet. His voice stayed level because if it shook, he knew the mayor would use that too. January 14th, he said. City Hall, second-floor conference room. Meeting about delayed renewals. Present were Mayor Hale, Carl Benton, and me. Hale leaned back. Convenient memory. Carl Benton's pen rolled from his fingers and tapped the table. Marlene Price called from the second row. I remember that week. Mateo closed early to go to City Hall. He told half the lunch line he had a permit meeting. Hale's smile tightened. A customer's memory is not verification. No, Mateo said. But the tape is. He pressed play. For 2 seconds there was only static. Then chairs scraped through the tiny speaker, followed by Carl's voice saying the coffee machine was broken. Carl closed his eyes. The room understood that sound before it understood the words. It was ordinary, boring, real in the way staged things rarely are. Then Mayor Hale's recorded voice came through. You want your renewals cleared, Mr. Alvarez. Then you stop asking questions about the riverfront zone. Nobody interrupted. The tape continued. There are going to be changes downtown. People who cooperate will be relocated. People who embarrass this office will discover how many regulations they have been ignoring. A reporter's phone rose higher. Hale's face lost its camera shape. Mateo let it play. On the recording, his own voice sounded tired. My permit is legal. Then Hale. Clear as a bell. Legal is whatever survives review. The chamber changed before the mayor did. It was not a gasp. It was worse for him than that. It was comprehension spreading row by row. Council members shifting in their seats. A donor lowering his chin. Ruthless little calculations waking up behind polished faces. Sophia stared at the recorder as if it had brought her mother's warning back from the dead. Paper gets lost. Voices do not. Hale reached for the device. Mateo covered it with his palm. No, he said quietly. You already had your hearing. The words landed clean. Officer Harper moved closer, but this time she stood beside the table, not behind Mateo. Hale pulled his hand back and forced a smile that did not survive the first second. This is being taken wildly out of context, he said. That was a broader discussion about policy compliance. Porter's voice was sharp. You threatened selective enforcement. I discussed regulatory realities. You tied his permit renewals to silence about the riverfront zone. That is your interpretation. Mateo opened the tin box again and removed the certified page Ruth Kim had given him. He did not wave it. He did not dramatize it. He placed it beside the city envelope. This is from yesterday, he said. Permit active. No suspension order entered. Porter took the page, read the seal, and passed it to the city clerk. The clerk's voice trembled slightly. Certified permit status dated Thursday. Active, no suspension order entered. That was the supporting fact, simple enough for everyone to follow. The mayor had called Mateo illegal, while the city's own record said he was not. Hale's eyes darted to Carl. Carl looked down at his hands. Carl, Porter said, did you issue removal notices knowing his permit was active? The supervisor swallowed. I issued notices under direction from the mayor's office. Hale rose. Do not answer that. Carl's voice cracked. I already did. The room erupted then, not in chaos, but in all the sounds people make when permission to be quiet finally ends. Chairs creaked. Reporters whispered into phones. A council member demanded the city attorney be called. Someone in the back said, That's why the peanut stand disappeared too. Hale struck the gavel once. This hearing is out of order. Mateo picked up the acknowledgement form. For a moment, everyone thought he might tear it. He did not. He slid it back to the mayor with 2 fingers. "I will not sign a lie." Hale's jaw worked. "You are exposing yourself to serious consequences." Mateo nodded once. "So are you." The line did not need volume. It had the weight of a man who had spent years lowering his voice so others would not be afraid of his accent, and had finally decided their comfort was no longer his burden. Councilwoman Porter stood fully now. "As a member of this council, I am requesting an immediate suspension of this proceeding pending independent review," she said. "I am also requesting preservation of all records related to sidewalk vendor enforcement and the riverfront zone." The mayor pointed at her. "You do not have authority to hijack my hearing." "No," Porter said, "but the council has authority to call an emergency session, and every camera in this room just watched you try to revoke an active license after threatening the license holder on tape." That was when the reporters moved. Not physically at first, their attention shifted like a lens focusing. Hale was no longer the man giving quotes. He was the story. Officer Harper spoke into her radio in a low voice, requesting the city attorney and a supervisor to the council chamber. She did not touch Mateo's cart. She did not touch the tin box. Sophia stood with one hand over her mouth. Mateo wanted to go to her, but he stayed where he was because leaving the table too soon would let Hale reclaim the room. The mayor tried one more time. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, palms open now. "What you are seeing is a coordinated political attack dressed up as a motion. This man has been advised by people who do not care about public safety. We cannot let sentimental stories override standards." Marlene Price rose. "I'm a nurse," she said. "I know what it sounds like when someone tries to make harm look like procedure." The chamber quieted around her. "I watched him serve food through rain, heat, and grief," she continued. "I watched his daughter do homework on a milk crate because her father was working 2 lives at once. You can say rules all day, Mayor, but that tape says what rule you were really using." Hale had no gentle answer for that, so he chose contempt. "This is not a hospital ward, Ms. Price." "No," Marlene said. "People get more honesty there." A few people clapped, then more. Porter raised a hand, not to stop support, but to keep the record clean. "Mr. Alvarez," she said, "do you request this recording and certified permit status be entered into the hearing record?" Hale said, "I object." Porter did not even glance at him. Mateo placed one palm on the tin box and one on Elena's cart. "Yes," he said, "and I request a formal review of the mayor's action." There it was. Not rescue, not pity. A request made in public on the record by the man they had tried to corner into silence. The clerk repeated it aloud as she typed. "Respondent requests formal review of mayoral action." The business owners in the front row no longer seemed eager to be seen near him. Carl Benton pushed his stack of forms away as if the paper itself had become dangerous. Within minutes, the city attorney arrived and asked for a recess. Porter objected to removing Mateo's cart or seizing property while the review was pending. 2 council members agreed. The order was not destroyed that day, but it was frozen. The 5-year bar was paused. The fine was held. The tow truck outside was told to leave. Procedural words, yes, but procedure had been the weapon. Now it was finally pointed at the truth. As people began to stand, Mayor Hale leaned toward Mateo one last time, low enough that only those near the table could hear. "You have no idea what you just started." Mateo picked up the recorder and placed it back in the tin box. "I know exactly," he said. "I started telling the whole story. The tow truck left before Mateo did. That was the first consequence. It was small, almost ugly in how ordinary it looked. No sirens, no dramatic arrest, just a driver receiving a call, climbing back into his cab, and pulling away from City Hall without Elena's cart behind him. But Sophia watched it go, like she was watching a storm miss their roof." That evening, Mateo did not open for dinner. He pushed the cart back to its corner on Bay Street with Marlene walking on one side and Sophia on the other. A few people from the hearing followed at a distance, not cheering, just making sure he did not have to walk alone. The next morning, the city posted a notice. The permit revocation was suspended pending independent review. The $500 fine was placed on hold. All enforcement actions against sidewalk vendors in the riverfront zone were paused until outside counsel reviewed the mayor's office communications. It did not fix everything, but it stopped the blade. By Monday, the hearing clip had spread across Savannah. Not the whole tape, not the legal details, just the worst sentence and Mateo's quiet answer afterward. People who had walked past his cart for years now stopped and read the menu as if seeing it clearly for the first time. Some apologized for never learning his name. Mateo accepted their words, but he did not hand out easy forgiveness to make anyone feel cleaner. He served food. He counted change. He kept the line moving. 2 weeks later, Mayor Victor Hale announced he was taking a temporary leave while the City Ethics Board conducted a formal inquiry. The Riverfront Improvement Plan was not canceled, but its vendor removal provisions were frozen. Carl Benton was placed on administrative reassignment after giving a sworn statement that the mayor's office had directed enforcement priorities. No one was dragged out in handcuffs. No one's life transformed overnight. The truth moved the way real truth often does, through paperwork, meetings, signatures, and people who suddenly remembered they had authority after the cameras made silence expensive. Councilwoman Porter called Mateo personally when the review panel issued its first finding. "The city is restoring your license without restriction," she said, "and the council approved reimbursement for your citation costs and lost operating days." Mateo sat at the kitchen table with the phone pressed to his ear. Sophia was doing homework across from him. The blue tin cash box sat between them, open for the first time without fear. "Thank you," Mateo said. Porter paused. "Mr. Alvarez, the council will also be issuing a public apology." He stared at Elena's photograph on the refrigerator. "Say my wife's name," he said. On the other end, Porter went quiet. "What?" "At the apology. Say Elena Alvarez. She filed those papers. She built the cart, too." Porter's voice softened. "I will." The apology came on a Thursday afternoon, outside City Hall, in front of the same building where Mateo had once felt his accent shrink under fluorescent lights. Porter stood at the microphone and said Elena's name. Sophia held her father's hand so tightly his fingers hurt. Mayor Hale was not there. His attorney had released a statement denying intentional wrongdoing while acknowledging that certain remarks were regrettable. The ethics board had not finished. The voters would decide some of it later. The law would decide the rest. Mateo did not need to see him. He had spent too long letting powerful men choose the size of the room. A month after the hearing, the cart had a new permit sticker in the window. Not hidden, centered. Under it, Mateo placed a small laminated copy of the city's apology, not as decoration, but as a boundary. Customers noticed. Some asked questions. He answered only when he wanted to. The old tin box changed too. Sophia cleaned the silver tape from the corner and replaced it with a neat blue patch she bought from a craft store. Inside, the recorder stayed wrapped in the folded towel. But it no longer felt like a weapon. It felt like a family tool. Like the binder, the spice jars, the photograph, the recipes Elena had written in 2 languages. One Saturday morning, Sophia stood behind the cart with a notebook, adding up sales. "You know," she said, "Mom was right." Mateo sprinkled cumin over a tray of chicken. "About many things, about labeling everything." He smiled. She tapped the tin box. "That one should say proof." Mateo shook his head. "No." "What then?" He took a blank sticker, thought for a moment, and wrote one word in careful black ink. Voice. Sophia read it and leaned her head against his shoulder. The line at the cart stretched down the block that day. Not because people wanted a scandal. Scandals fade. They came because the food was good, because the corner felt warmer with him there, and because some places are held together by people who never get their names on plaques. Near closing, Mateo took Elena's photograph from the drawer and set it beside the register where the sun could touch it. For years, he had kept it tucked away to protect it from grease, rain, and strangers. Now he let the city see her. The street noise moved around them, tires on brick, tourists laughing, a church bell in the distance, Sophia counting bills under her breath. Mateo locked the tin box, wiped the counter, and rested one hand on the cart Elena had helped him build. He had not won because the city became kind. He had won because he stopped letting unkind people define the record. And sometimes justice begins that simply. One person keeps the proof. One person refuses the lie. One voice, played at the right moment, reminds a whole room what the truth sounds like. If you were in that hearing, what would you have done when the mayor reached for the recorder? Tell me in the comments. And if stories about quiet people finding their voice matter to you, subscribe for the next one.